What's up, y'all? It's TruthTiger. Welcome back to another episode of the TruthTiger Experience. I'm going to talk today about taking ownership of your crazy story. This is something I really struggled with a lot. There was a lot of stuff that happened to me in life, especially in childhood, that I did not want to share with the world. I did not want to share with others. I wanted to pretend like I lived a different life. I wanted to pretend like, certain things that happened to me didn't happen, and for me, I talked about this in my previous video, but in my childhood, I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, very cult-like environment. I had to wear the yarmulke on my head. On Saturday, I had to, couldn't use any electronic stuff like that. We had to pray 3 times a day. I was sent away to these different schools and stuff, and I was very isolated out, and grew up in a very cult-like kind of environment. And when people ask me, where do I go to high school? I don't want to tell them, Most people, I didn't want to tell them. I didn't want to tell people how I grew up or who I was or what this was about, mostly because I don't even want to be that. It's just what my parents kind of pushed on me and, what they chose for me, which, they made a bad choice. But, and your thing could be entirely different. Your thing could be, I know a lot of people who've grown up in bad poverty and, they don't want to tell people about that. I know people that, have all kind of different situations. There's crazy stuff going on, crazy parents, crazy family. I had all that too, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get into it with people. They don't want to. You want to act like this stuff didn't happen to you. That's what I felt like. I wanted to act like, because I don't want to I don't want to be tied or connected, to all this stuff. It's not just what I said. There's a lot of other stuff that happened too. I found Jesus Christ later on in life. I joined the church. The church was not good. There were people there that wanted to patronize me, and because of my background a lot, and just a lot of narcissists and stuff like that. And I don't want to be telling that to people as my story. I had a weird roommate from there that I thought was all religious, was this good person, and was a total pathetic weirdo, and very toxic, just very weird person, and it's there's a lot of stuff that happens. I've had a lot of relationships not go well and whatever, just stuff like that. And I didn't want to, take ownership of that whole story too. There's things I've screwed up too. It wasn't just other people, but I just didn't want to, own all that. And I was incredibly socially awkward when I was younger, especially around people who were outside of this whole Jewish thing I grew up around, because it's I was in this tight group of insiders, and will these people who are outside of it, will they accept me, will they understand? And I don't really, I need to get to know the rest of the world and stuff. And there was a lot of stuff I had to figure out, and a lot of people wanted to kind of choose my identity for me without me getting to really tell them who I am and to explain that to them. And it was just hard. It made me really not want to be around anybody. It really made me want to just kind of be I don't tell nobody nothing about myself, That's what it made me want to be like. It made me really want to I'm just a quiet guy. I don't say anything about myself because, someone starts to ask me about childhood or this or that. And then not only do I have to tell them this whole story and explain this whole thing to them, but it's now all that unresolved trauma is bubbling up, and I have to experience that, and I have to relive that. Especially the childhood stuff. The stuff that's more in adulthood, whatever, I could have more of a handle on it. But the stuff that's in childhood, that stuff really cuts deep, because you're a lot more sensitive as a child, and that's when you're being formulated. And we got formulated and molded in weird ways, in ways that were not good for us. And it's I'm trying to say, hey, I'm not who my parents and who society and who the Matrix molded me to be. I'm my own person, you know, through God and through the free will he gave me. I'm able to have a new, fresh identity. I don't have to be that same person that the world formed me to be. You know, formed me into something that was not going to be good for me. Formed me into a person who lives in bondage. Formed me into a person who's like not free. Formed me into a person who has to live a life of falsehood. Yeah, and it's just like, you know, I need to own that story and just say, hey, that's my story. And when I own it and I'm able to speak on it with confidence and I'm able just to be firm on it, like, it's good. But when people, the thing is, most people are pretty mean. Your average person is like pretty mean and judgmental. And when they sense any kind of a crack in you or any kind of weakness, they go on the attack. If they sense anything that's, you're not showing full, total confidence, and you have these vulnerabilities or these cracks, like, they'll reject you, they'll look down upon you, they'll try to bully you. I've literally had these reactions where, like, someone asked me about childhood and stuff like that, and I'm just not able to give them the good answer they want. And, you know, all of a sudden that person, they were my friend, they're not my friend anymore, they don't like me anymore, they're not, and it's like, I could see people really change a lot. And, you know, a lot of people also will say, like, well, why don't you go back to what you were doing before? Why don't you keep talking to your parents? Why don't you keep staying involved with your family? Why don't you keep staying involved in that? For me, for the religion I grew up in, people are like, why don't you get back involved with that? You should still be doing that. People who are not even involved in it. You know, so people will have all these responses and all these things that they're going to say, and you have to be very firm in that, and like really take ownership of that story, and to say, hey, like, I was thrown into the freaking shit carnival. That's what it was. I was thrown into the shit carnival, and I was rolled around in the poop. But I'm not going to go around and say I'm this shit carnival performer, you know, former shit carnival performer. I'm not going to go around and identify myself like that. I'm going to say, look, that's what happened to me. I was trapped in that. I was, you know, locked in that. And now I got out. And the truth is, a lot of people are connected to toxic things like that. The majority of people are connected or held prisoner by some kind of toxic, weird stuff like that. They have unresolved childhood trauma that they have not acknowledged themselves. And when they see you acknowledge it and you call it out for what it is, and when they see you like being like, yeah, I'm getting past this stuff, I'm not a shit carnival performer, they realize in their own life, they're like, oh man, I'm a shit carnival performer. I have not called out my narcissistic parents or stopped contacting them or set boundaries with them, or I have not done anything to work with that, you know? And then they start to look at their own life and realize that they're a coward, and realize that they have not stood up for anything or stepped out of anything, or, you know, ever really actually stood up for themselves in a real way in terms of that. And they see you say, like, yeah, I walked away from my family, I walked away from my former religion, I walked away from all this stuff, I walked away from a bad marriage, whatever. And then they're realizing that, hey, they didn't walk away from that stuff, they didn't have the strength to do it. And, you know, people want to put you in a box. People love labels. People love to look at you and point at you and say, you're this guy. They're going to point their finger. And there were a lot of people I knew who were not Jewish people themselves. They wanted to point a finger at me and they go, he's the Jewish guy. It's him. And they really wanted to do that, and they got a big kick out of that. And they thought it was really fun and funny and stuff. And I'm trying to tell them, like, look, I don't really identify with that stuff as much as I used to. It's something I grew up in. And it's like, you got to really set a lot of boundaries with these type of people. I got to tell them, look, I'm rocking with Jesus now. I don't really do all that. I don't have good feelings about that, you know. And one thing also that I want to talk about is, when you are honest about your family and your past and your childhood and whatever, maybe a bad marriage, a bad relationship, bad friends, whatever it is, when you're honest about that and you're like, yeah, that's a bunch of trash, I'm walking away from it, they idealized their bad situation. Because most people did not grow up with like good parents and good situations in life. Most people grew up with a bunch of crazy crap. And when you like say, hey, it's a shit carnival, but they think, no, it's the tulip circus, it's the tulip festival, you know, the shit's just fertilizer, you know, and they have all these excuses, and they enable, and they don't like call this stuff out because they're too cowardly. And when they see that you're someone who is like, no, that's bad, I'm not going to enable that, support that, be a part of that, I'm not going to continue to be freaking smashed by that, I'm not going to be kicked around by that, they realize like that they are, you know, that they in their own lives have not stood up to that, they in their own lives have not healed, they in their own lives have not gotten out, and you have. And they realize that they're enabling this like bad thing that's bad for them, and you're not. And they would rather, I'm trying to think of how to explain this, but you're breaking their like rose-colored glasses delusion. They have this rose-colored glasses delusion that the shit carnival was the tulip festival, and they don't want that broken, because then they will have to acknowledge the pain of the past, they'll have to acknowledge their trauma, they'll have to heal, they'll have to set boundaries, they'll have to cut people out, they'll have to do all that stuff, and they don't want to have to actually get honest, get real, and do it. And it's like it makes them feel like cowards, it makes them feel weak, it makes them feel like whatever. It just doesn't, they don't want to have to acknowledge it. They want to pretend everything's cool. You know, that's the bottom line. They want to pretend like everything was all cool and all good and all great and all amazing. And when you're like, hey, no, it wasn't, they look at their situation, which was similar, and they're like, oh crap. And they're like, they want to just like defend it. It's like they have like Stockholm syndrome or something, and they want to defend their captors. And when they see you fighting back, they will try to like work with the captors against you almost. That's not a perfect way to explain it, but that's the basic psychology like of it. And you know, it's pretty crazy. And a lot of these people, they also recognize that a lot of the stuff you're saying, it's like deep down that's who they are, and deep down they're the kind of person that would want to enable that stuff and conform to that stuff, and they're the kind of person that's like kind of likes narcissism and conformity and the way of society and stuff like that, and societal programming and whatever. They love the Matrix, they love organized religion and, you know, materialism and government, and they, whatever, our whole, it's deeper than that. It's our whole just like egotistical, greedy, ego-driven society. They kind of love it. They love the ego and the lies and the falsehood and whatever. They love the whole society trap. And when you're like talking about your bad childhood and it was bad and you don't like it and you're like, it's not cool, you're sort of like calling out the Matrix too, whether you know it or not. And for a lot of people, they'll get upset and they'll start to be mad at you because it's like you're calling out the Matrix. And then a lot of people also, they're very like, I don't know, they hate like people showing vulnerability. They hate people being real. They hate like people trying to like heal and calling stuff out, and you know, they just like, they're really against that. And when they see that you're someone that's like, bad things happened in the past, it's, I don't know, even if it's nothing to do with them, they feel like personally threatened by you talking about how you won't talk to your family anymore, or how you walked away from things in the past. They'll feel personally threatened, like you're gonna walk away from them. I don't know, you know, it's very weird, but a lot of this stuff makes it very, very hard for us to own our story, you know. And the thing about this stuff that happened in the past, it really does put a stain on us. It puts a stain on us that sticks with us, and it's hard to wash it out. And most people are gonna look at you like, oh, you're this stained, broken, messed up, weird person. I don't like that. I don't want, you're damaged. You had bad things happen to you. Ew, we don't like that, you know. Even though they themselves have had the same things happen, similar things happen, related things happen, maybe worse things happened, even though they've been through the same things themselves most of the time, maybe not exactly the same, but similar kind of things, it's like they just don't want to like hear that you've had a problem. I also think they like kind of hate justice. They don't like the right thing being done. They don't like having a sense of like morals and ethics. And I think when you talk about your story like that, you are asserting a sense of ethics and morals and like right and wrong. You're saying that was a wrong. I don't support that wrong. I don't hang out with those people who wronged me. I say no to the wrong. And they kind of look at themselves like, oh, this person dislikes evil. And they're like, well, I'm evil and this person's not going to like me. You know, there's a lot of reasons why, but I don't know, you know. It's also just like this like high school mentality where like if you had something bad happen or whatever, now you're not one of the popular kids anymore. Now you're not cool anymore because you whatever showed vulnerability or because you like had a difficult childhood or whatever. Now you're weird or whatever. I don't know, you know. It's this weird thing people do, and you really got to put both your feet on the ground, own your story. Hang around cool people who are not going to be weird about this type of stuff. And if people are weird about it, just kind of call them out. Say, no, I don't like that. You know, put both your feet on the ground, all 10 toes on the ground, and be like, this is my story. This is what it is, you know. There's a lot of stuff I don't like about it, but I came from where I came from. I came up the way I came up. It is what it is, you know. I'm not going to try to be like, act like things were different. You know, I'm not. And if I'll lose a few people with that, whatever, you know, whatever. But you can see how a lot of things in society, if you came from poverty, I think I said this before, you know, there's certain kind of people might ask you, oh, where'd you grow up? What's this? What's that? And they might look down, you know. They might look down if they perceive you as having had less than them. Level of education can be this way too. There are so many things that could be this way. You've had a divorce. People can start to like look down on you for that. You know, there's a lot of stuff that people can look down on you for, you know. And it's just, it makes it tough for you to own your own story and tell your own story. But it's like, not only do you have to overcome that like past trauma, you now have to overcome these people who are judging you for having trauma. That's really what it is. It's like, now you got to overcome all these like judgmental people. Oh, you had trauma. You had something bad happen to you. Now that must mean you're bad. That must mean you deserved it. Oh, you know, and they're just going to come in and judge. And, oh, you walked away from your family. You know, you walked away from your toxic parents. Like, oh, you should have stuck around. What are you doing, you know? Ah, man, it's just, you got to heal from the trauma and all these just freaking weird haters and stuff that are mad at you for having trauma, that are just bullies too. They can see like you're vulnerable and you're hurt and like you have things you're mixed up about and twisted up about, and you know, emotions you haven't fully processed and things that you're still hurting about, and they're like, oh, let me freaking stick another knife in and make it worse. Ha ha ha, you know. That's how a lot of people are. That's how a lot of people are. And it's just like, man, a lot of people are just real weird like that. So you really got to just own your own story. These kind of people who are just like going to be mad at you or weird at you for that, just be like, nope, whatever. And the thing is, if you're doing well in the moment and you're balling out and you're winning and you're like, things are good, these people, they can see past your past, you know. They can see past it. They won't care. But if you're struggling, they're like, oh, you're struggling. I don't want that, you know. I don't like that, you know. It's just, it's very ridiculous, but it's what you got to deal with, and they'll try to make it really hard for you to own your story and for you to just be like confident in who you are, and for you to just be like, hey, this happened, I didn't like it, I didn't enjoy it, it's not who I am, but you know, I got dragged through the dirt by a bad family for the most part. I got dragged through the dirt through bad friends, whatever. You know, a lot of different stuff can happen, but there's a lot of people where if they see you like showing vulnerability or struggling or, you know, needing help. They're like, oh, needs help? Screw that, you know. Yeah, screw that, weakling, needing help, whatever. I don't even know. I mean, they don't say that because they don't say that directly, but they're like, screw that person needs help, you know. I don't know. So you kind of got to heal on your own. I've even found a lot of therapists and mental health professionals are not helpful at all in terms of this. Like, I tried to talk to one of them about my childhood, being Orthodox Jewish and all that stuff, and being sent away to school at a young age and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, she didn't care. She was like, oh, well, you know, if you didn't get touched inappropriately, then nothing bad happened. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't know. I can get into that later, but like, I mean, whatever. Separate video, but you'd be surprised that people who are literally like, you're paying to care, don't even care. And, you know, it's just like, man, it's very crazy. But yeah, you got to own your story. Your story's your story. It happened to you. You know, you're going to feel a lot better once you own your story. And it's not just like this thing in the back that you hope does not get brought up, or, you know, this thing in the back that you want to pretend didn't happen to you, or this thing in the back that you're just like, you just have like crazy anger and frustration about because you haven't fully processed it. Like, you want to own your story, own what happened to you, you know, own your crazy story. Take ownership of your crazy story. And, you know, don't just like, oh, only reminisce on the good times and talk about that one funny story you have, or, you know, try to make it like it was some big fun time. Don't fake it like that, you know. Like, just own it for what it is. It was a bunch of miserable crap. You're out of it now. You know, God delivered you. You got out of it. You did what you had to do. You fought hard. You worked hard. And now you don't ever have to be stuck in that stuff ever again. And just try to start owning the story. And all these judgmental people who are going to, like, judge you for having trauma and try to bully you and pile on and stuff, screw them. Don't really talk to those people. Put those people on the outside. Reject those people. And, yeah, take ownership of your story. It's your story. It's your life. It is what it is. What happened, happened. You know, it takes a lot of self-esteem and self-confidence, you know, to own your story. It does. It takes a lot of self-ownership. It really takes, you know, being very solid and steady in yourself. It takes a lot of solidness and steadiness in yourself. But yeah, you can take ownership of your own story, no matter how crazy and weird it is. You can own it. And look, you know, if there's things that are really deep, dark details that people want to ask you about, you can always just tell people, look, I don't want to talk about that. And if people can't respect that and need to pry in and stuff, it's no bueno with those people, you know. But yeah, you can own your story. You can tell your story. It's yours. It happened to you. It is what it is. And yeah, I'm going to end this video here. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless. Much love, and I will see you all next time.